Hey all, MrAyrit here, and this is the new iPhone 16. This is the base model. Now, I am switching to this from an iPhone 14 Pro, which I used for a couple of years. Thought that phone was great, but looking at the specs, I wondered if I needed the 16 Pro. My wife actually got a 16 Pro, but I decided to go with the 16 really just to see if I could get away with it and if I'd miss the Pro features. So this video is going to be about my experience with the 16. We're going to dive into just like everyday use, and then most specifically, we're going to look at some photo/video comparisons to see if we think we can spot a difference between the 16, the 16 Pro, and even the older 14 Pro. Let's dive in. So in my everyday use, I haven't noticed a ton of difference coming from the 14 Pro. Like as far as just how fast the phone feels and everything like that, they feel very, very similar. I mean, the 14 Pro was already pretty darn fast, and this is just like a little bit faster than that. One thing that I haven't really noticed either is the screen difference. The 16 does not have the, adaptable screen refresh rate. So theoretically, it should be a little bit like skippier and not quite as smooth. I can't say I really noticed much of a difference myself as far as using it. The one thing that I do notice is it is lighter than the 14 Pro was, and I looked it up, and it's maybe about 1.5 grams lighter than the 14 Pro, and I would say that actually makes a pretty noticeable difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking this thing is 6 grams versus the 14 Pro's 7.5 grams, it does make a noticeable difference, and I appreciate having a little bit lighter phone. Outside of that, I haven't really noticed much of a difference. I think it works just as good. Is it better? It's hard to say that it's any better, really, but it certainly works really well. It's a snappy phone. It works just like it should. I would say that I do actually really like having this camera button, not to like mess with the sliders to take photos with and stuff. I really don't like using it for that. I do find that if I try to click it to take a picture, I do wiggle the phone. I much rather just tap on the back of the screen like I'm used to, but I do like having a dedicated button to actually just open the camera app quickly. I think it's really good for that purpose. As others have said, the positioning on this is a little bit off. Like it is kind of in an awkward spot, but you get used to it after you've used it a little bit. So speaking of photography, let's dive in and take a look at some photo and video comparisons. This is really what I was interested in because I'm worried that I'm missing out without that extra lens, and I know that the 16 Pro is supposed to have a nicer wide-angle lens. Let's see if in some real-world use cases we can notice a difference between these phones when it comes to photography and video. Okay, so I'm just watching this video here just as you guys are watching it, and I gotta say, like, I've watched it once before and I really struggled to find any real meaningful differences between them. I noticed that the 14 Pro colors and kind of contrast look slightly different compared to the 16 and the 16 Pro. I'm going to chalk that up to maybe I had a photographic style that was a little bit different on that phone when I was doing this. I should have double checked that before I did this, but I mean the 16 and the 16 Pro look a little bit warmer regardless. And I would say that the 14 Pros look just like a little bit punchier and maybe like a little bit more sharpened. I feel like the 16 and the 16 Pro, like these are so similar for the most part. Like I think it's going to be really challenging to see a meaningful difference between the two of them. The one, and these are all kind of different cameras. Like this is the one-time lens, you've seen a couple of the wide angles as well. I would say that I feel like the wide angle on the 16 Pro is just a touch sharper, and there's a little more detail there, but it's certainly not a super meaningful thing. The clocks here are interesting because keep in mind the 16 Pro has a 5x lens and the 16 doesn't even have a 3x. I still thought that they looked pretty good. I mean, the 16 Pro has a bit of an edge there, I thought. These product photos look very similar across the board. Here's 1x outside, akin. Is there a meaningful difference between any of these? Gosh, I really don't think so. This is, again, a zoom, and this is based on the 16 Pro's lens here. Again, I think it wins in sharpness, but considering the others are like digital zooming, I don't think it's nearly as much as I would have anticipated. Wide angles, again, outside in good light conditions, very similar. And then once again with these videos here, I really feel like the 16 and the 16 Pro look quite similar, and I do think they look noticeably better than the 14 Pro when it comes to just the video here. I feel like they look a little more natural, a little bit sharper, a little less kind of noisy and like over brightened, I would say. So honestly, all things said and done so far, after a week of use and after looking at the photos and video samples here, I am quite happy with my decision to just go with the 16. It's lighter, it's cheaper, but I think daily use case for most people, and even taking lots of photographs and videos, I think the only case where I feel like the 16 Pro could really be justified is if you take a lot of photos and videos with both the wide angle and the 5x lens. I think if you're going to really use those a lot, then probably the 16 Pro is the way to go. But if you're like me and you're just kind of like typically just a main camera person, I think the main cameras across them look very similar. I don't even know if they're different, if I'm being honest. And I think as long as you're only occasionally using the wide angle and occasionally using the 5x, then I don't really think you need it, especially when you consider like upgrading to the Pro is $300-$400 more, depending on what, memory spec you get and all that stuff. So did I need to upgrade from my 14 Pro to a new 16? Not really, I wouldn't say, but there are a few things that I'm enjoying about having the new 16 model. I'm happy to have the less weight, and I'm happy to have the dedicated camera button, not really for using the settings on it, but at least to bring my camera up quickly. I like that. So I'm into the 16. I'm glad I went with the base model. Maybe I'll do a follow-up here after a little bit longer to see what I think, and we'll see if any other things pop up that I miss having some of those other lenses, or that my wife's phone seems to be better for. But as of now, I think if you're looking at a new iPhone, I'd just look at the base model and get your memory spec that you want, and I think you're going to be pretty darn happy with it. So yeah, that's my first impressions with the 16, with the new iPhone 16. I hope you found that helpful. Feel free to drop any comments or questions down below, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thanks for being with me. I appreciate you watching. Hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.